Education is preparation for reparations.
We'd like to welcome Belle Ribeiro Addy MP, who is the chair of the All-party Parliamentary Group on Afrikan Reparations. I could start with a welcome to you.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for being here today. I have to give you some apologies from Diane Abbott, who had to go to an event outside of London and was running a bit late coming back in. She sends her apologies and she says, for a country that's used to so much bad weather, she doesn't understand how a little bit of rain can disrupt transport so much, but she will be with us later in the day and tomorrow. So welcome to all of you to the UK Reparations Conference 2023, charting a pathway to reparative justice. And thank you to those of you that arrived so early and have been so patient with us. We present this conference to you on behalf of the All-party Parliamentary Group on Afrikan Reparations, and we bring together campaigns, institutions and individuals to discuss actions to address the legacy of the trafficking and enslavement of African peoples. As a member of British Parliament, I'm proud to stand in the great tradition of the late great Bernie Grant, the founder of the UK Reparations movement, and indeed, he was the first Member of Parliament to demand an apology and reparative justice in the House of Commons. Now, in the past few years, we've seen momentum grow in the surrounding reparations, but we can't forget those that have long fought for reparations, long before I was born. And today, we are here to ensure that as those voices get louder, that the grassroots are not drowned out. As many discussions are being held internationally, it's really clear that there's no consensus on reparations and how it should be achieved. It was also very clear that we didn't have a forum that brought together all of the different viewpoints from across the UK and internationally. So here we are, with the aim of ending this conference with a unified statement, one which cannot be ignored and one which will advance our call for policy on reparative justice. Now, we meet 30 years after the first Pan-African Conference on Reparations in Abuja, which led to the Abuja Proclamation on Reparations. And almost a year ago today, I met Dr. Julius Garvey at Lambeth Town Hall. And as you know, Dr. Julius Garvey is the son of Marcus Garvey. And he said to me, when I explained to him about the work of the All-party Parliamentary Group, he said it was key that a conference was held here in the UK, what he referred to as the belly of empire. Now, my parents will have something slightly different to say about this, but I'm not one to defy my elders, and against many obstacles, at his word, we are here today. He said that we should have this conference. He said that it should be international, and we have worked across the APPG with our Secretariat, who are Ford and Stop the Mangamizi, and we have brought this conference to you today. Now, you ask Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism is so important. It's so important that we are going to have an entire plenary dedicated to it, so I won't go into it too much. But I want everybody to understand that it's the acceptance of our commonalities as people of African descent. People ask why the APPG is called the All-party Parliamentary Group of Afrikan Reparations. They even ask what the K is about. And we explain that although we may be in different countries, have different experiences, we share a common struggle as peoples of African descent, a common struggle which has its direct root in the enslavement and trafficking of peoples of African descent. A common struggle which actually saw all of us diminished to a small number of chromosomes that have no other biological basis than to determine the colour of our skin. An entire false human classification system that was set up to justify our enslavement and to make us hate ourselves and even hate each other. Divide and rule. And so we come here as Pan-Africanists so that we move forward for reparative justice together, because we all have complex histories, and many of us are even denied the information about that. I'm the descendant of enslaved peoples taken to Brazil, in South America, enslaved peoples taken to the Caribbean, and colonized Africans. And I don't even know the entirety of their history. But as a British politician, I still believe that it is important for me to call full reparations from the UK and other Western governments because Britain has a moral duty. I'm told that I should be pleased in this country because some people have made certain gains because we have certain representation in certain areas. There was a black president in the US. We have some black billionaires. You're a member of parliament. What do you have to complain about? Yet right now there are people across the world that look just like me who are suffering. We must make clear that we are not free until we are all free, and that silence is compliance. And no matter the advantages I've been afforded in life, I will not be compliant in the continued subjugation of African peoples. This conference is as much an educational piece as anything else because of all of the things that I would say I was advantages. I had a solid education, a political education, more so than anything else. And I had it at many events that were held in this very building. And I think it's really, really important when we talk about compliance that we recognise those that support us. Now, there are many, many partners that we'll have to thank for today, but one of the major ones is the Quakers of Great Britain. They recognise their own role in the enslavement of African peoples, and today, as a form of reparations, they have given us this building to use to have this discussion and want to move forward. And that points to the issue that it cannot just be about financial compensation, that there are many, many other ways in which we have to go about repair. Now, the harm that was done to us may have been rooted in capitalism and commerce, but the outcome was so much more, which is why we need this complete repair. I'm told often that slavery, and they say slavery, was a long time ago. And I want people to remember that it began a long time ago. It did not end a long time ago. And that when it ended, the shackles of slavery were replaced with other things. They were replaced with colonialism, near-colonialism, the IMF, unfair trade, continued theft and disregard, institutional racism and poverty. Just because they are not iron shackles does not mean they are shackles. And they ask why aid is not enough, or do you not accept the fact that you've been given loads and loads of money in aid? And I have to explain, and one of the things that we are going to discuss is that issue of aid, that some of these systems that have been put in place following enslavement and colonialism are literally just more forms of it. Unfortunately, we have seen a situation where the international aid has become an industry. And what do you need for an industry? Supply and demand. It depends on the supply of people impoverished right across the world, and that has to be wrong, and we need to decolonize aid, and that will be discussed today. They also say that ideas around reparations are quite radical. But there was once a time that it was radical that somebody that looked like me could be free, that a woman could even vote in this country, and that a black person could be a member of parliament. So I say that some of the struggles we have today are pointing to the progress of tomorrow. Today, over this weekend, and to those of you that commit to today and tomorrow, I'll be very, very pleased to have for that. We will discuss a range of different issues, and I ask you to engage with them in the spirit that they are put. You will see on this conference, which is ever-changing, on this conference schedule, which is ever-changing, that you will have many, many different conversations. One's about women's rights, community regeneration, cultural redress, all of these different aspects. Education, again, very, very important. Environmental reparations, and many, many more in between. I ask that you engage with them in the spirit that they are intended, and that when we leave here, we leave not having just talked a lot, we leave having educated ourselves even further, because I am educated every time I hear any of you speak about reparations, that we leave having educated ourselves, that we leave with a renewed purpose, not to just have conversations, but to build on what happened 30 years ago with the Abuja Declaration, and to move forward with policy on reparations. The call is reparations now, and with a united movement, I believe that that is something that we can achieve. Thank you very much.
We'd like to welcome you to the UK Afrikan Reparations Conference, an inauguration which is the inauguration. Yes. Let's be that type of crowd today and get involved. Which is an inauguration of the All-party Parliamentary Group. An inauguration of the All-party Parliamentary Group on African Reparations, which will launch in 2021. After decades of campaigning efforts of grassroots campaigners, freedom-fighting forces on the continent, networks of scholars and activists, researchers, youth and student mobilizations, and the hard labours of our elders and our ancestors and those who have sacrificed for this moment. So we would like to open this session today with a libation, which is an African tradition of honouring our ancestors and those of our forebears who came before us. So please assume any posture of reverence and respect. And we'll be hearing from Elder Nana Kodju Bonsu of the Global African People's Parliament in the UK.
Greetings, family. Grand rising and uprising. I'm not usually found without my hat, but for this occasion, I have to give the ancestors the reverence. I start by, it's all about the vibration. And as a people, we're a vibration people. So we'll start with welcoming their presence. Father, Divine Mother, Father Heaven, Mother Earth, the energy, forces, and power of the universe, the cosmos, and the heavenly constellation. The elements of Father Heaven, earth, wind, fire, and water. The rich, bountiful, life-sustaining resources of Mama Earth, even the bugaboo. Known by many names, called by many names. The great Kushite, Kemite, Nubian, Akabalanite, Afurakan, Kemetiu, Kemetian, Supreme Being Life Source, Supreme Being Life Force, Supreme Being Life Energy, Supreme Being Life Creator, Supreme Being Life Giver, and Supreme Being Life Sustainer. Behold, a source, a force, and an energy that is greater than us, but dwells in us, and is expressed from and through us. The great Kushite, Kemite, Nubian, Akibolanite, Afurakan, Kemetiu, Kemetian, African ancestors, and ancestral spirits of the universe, the cosmos, and the heavenly constellation. We give thanks for this another day of creation. We give thanks that ancestors, you would have seen it fit that we should rise with Kafra, see the glory of Ra, and be afforded the protection of Amun towards sovereignty, autonomy, destiny, and African reparations. We give thanks that you are with us as we ask you to come into our presence. We connect to your power, and we are uplifted by the consciousness of your presence, your power, and your purpose. And as we gather today, we celebrate life. We celebrate the African life cycle, eternal, everlasting, indestructible, those who are yet to come, you who have gone before us, and those of us who have been given the task to be your voice, your eyes, your ears, and your feet. Today we ask that as you come, we welcome the life, the memory, the name, and the legacy of Dottie Bookman and Fatima. We welcome the life energy of Steve Biko. We welcome the life energy of Campa Vita. We welcome the life energy of Nzinga. We welcome the life energy of Hatshepsut. We welcome you because we are the fruit of your womb and of your loins, whom you love that you would have given your lives and shed your blood, that we would have a sense of being, of bearing, and of beginning as a sovereign people, creators of civilization and humanity. We welcome you, we give thanks for your presence, and we say Amun, Ra, and Ashe. We welcome you, O great ancestors. Tradian Pomkwame Ensa, Amun Ra, and Ashe. Osoro in Asasaya Ensa, Amun Ra, and Ashe. Nananum, Ensa Manfo, Amun Ra, and Ashe. We give you thanks for being our being, our bearing, and our life. Amun Ra and Ashe. Thank you.
And because we have convened this as an international conference, and we do this under the witness of our global African family, of our freedom fighting forces, of our indigenous communities of resistance, we would now like to introduce a Pan-African ancestral greetings from the Paramount Chief of Avatime, Osie Tekpor VII, the Paramount Chief of Avatime, which is in the west of Africa, who would like to greet those who have joined us today and our international audience.
Good afternoon, Donamilo, my comrades, friends, brothers and sisters participating in this year's African History Month. I am excited once again, to deliver to you this welcome address out of some excitement over the period of 1 year, which has seen a number of activities by the youth as a result of social media to remember the fight against colonialism and no-colonialism and imperialism by our forefathers led by Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. Two days ago, we have celebrated the birthday of Kwame Nkrumah, which has also brought together some of the wise sayings and revolutionary messages of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, the first president of Ghana, which talked about the face of neo-colonialism and its effect on our reparative justice. I see this gathering this afternoon as a moment of reflection, a moment that we who are at the forefront will use as a tool to reach out to our youth. I'm so excited also about the sub-theme, education, the preparation for reparation. And I believe that education, education, education would help our youth to change their mindset and refocus their attention onto the struggle that our forefathers began several decades ago, and to also use social media to propagate the message of reparation. Unfortunately, our governments have been looking at reparation in terms of payments of money. But I think that for us in Avatime, in the Volta region, reparation means the repair of the mindset through education that prepares us for reparation. The reparation that we are talking about is the repair of the planet Earth, so that we rediscover Mother Earth as a source of life. And I believe that this gathering this month to celebrate the African History Month would focus on such activities that will set our minds back to what our forefathers have been doing. Let us concentrate on our youth. The playground or the battleground for reparation is in Africa. And I pray that all those splinter groups that are scattered all over the world outside the African continent would come together with one voice and fight against neocolonialism, fight for reparation, and fight for reparative justice. I thank my heart for the All-party Parliamentary Group, was chaired by Honorable Ribeiro, Addy, and the members of the APPG group, as well as all the other freedom fighting groups that are using their force and money to make sure that we see the planet that we want, the Africa that we want, and the planet that we want. Mamlekano miawezalo ye mama paba ya mbara walkwen aya ozenulu aya opagiga klemolisiane aya okumlo bisuswa aya utila basimletile ato block kisaba climate change and the planet Earth here just ya lulwe ni blobaka blobas batretra lingini ato libale tumu kusa.
And I just want to put that video in context because Osie, Adza Tekpor VII wanted to join us live today, but in fact, 2 days ago, a massive flood struck the region of the Volta region, and the message literally says, the flood disaster in the Volta region has taken the attention of the Volta region House of Chiefs, where I'm a senior member, so I'm visiting the flood areas tomorrow. The Standing Committee of the House had a meeting today and we need to follow up with the visit to our people who've been victims of this crime. So he's unfortunately not able to join us because when we talk about the symptoms and legacies of colonialism, they are very real, and the actual conditions on the ground mean that many of our people can't join us or be in this conversation. The next contribution is also an ancestral greetings from, which hails from our African diaspora in Colombia, and where enslaved Africans, formerly enslaved Africans, liberated themselves and have formed marooned communities in liberated territories. And it's in fact, this message comes from the first liberated territory in all of Abiola, which is the name for the so-called Americas. And so this message comes directly from San Basilio de Palemque, and the Palenques or the Palenqueros are the African people who have reformed and re-civilized themselves in the diaspora in Abiola. And they also send their ancestral greetings to this event today.
Así naría toma Haná, toma gente lo que está fundado, Ahue, macaneando, por su pirita mambila, toma gente, Prieto, Andiaviayala, África, continente Mai, Rito Suto, Mahende indígena, Suto Tajarocho, y Tajarocho, Potajundo, Achá, Piache, Atue Mañó, lo que ten, Chuchari Andomiandi, cabeza así, Dicen da Akin, Bongani, y Palemque, y Ribeiro, el primer pueblo suelto de América, tiene la gente prieta, y está jarocho, y está jarochá, y está cubilante, ahue, potajundo, poema, chochar y gente. Bueno, buenos días a todas las personas que se encuentran acá reunidas en el día de hoy, a los maestros, a los tíos, a las tías, a toda esa gente que se encuentran trabajando por el bienestar de toda la gente negra en Abiola, América, en el continente madre, África, por el bienestar de los grupos indígenas, de la gente negra. Les habla Akin, Bongani, desde el primer pueblo libre de América, Palemque de Ribeiro. Estoy contento por estar compartiendo con ustedes este espacio en el día de hoy, trabajando para dignificar la vida de todas las poblaciones negras en el universo, en este continente, en cada rincón. Para mí es un orgullo compartir con nuestros hermanos, con ustedes, porque siempre he tenido como lema buscar las raíces. Es uno de nuestros propósitos y estar reunidos con ustedes en este espacio, en esta gran reunión, esta gran cumbre de personas negras buscando el mejor porvenir para nuestras comunidades. Es algo histórico, algo trascendental para nuestros pueblos. Es tiempo de que nosotros rindamos tributo a la memoria de todos esos ancestros que han luchado por el bienestar de nuestras comunidades, de nuestros pueblos, en todo el sentido de la palabra, a nivel ambiental, a nivel social, en condiciones de vida. Es un deber que nosotros como humanos, nosotros como pueblo negro, como pueblos indígenas, pueblos nativos, pueblos originarios, tenemos para con nuestra sociedad. Desde Palemque, un pueblo que ha vivido en resistencia siempre, estamos trabajando. Yo en lo personal lidero un proyecto deportivo que es por medio del cual hago impacto en la sociedad. Lidero una escuela de fútbol femenino llamada Panteras Prietas, la cual busca rendir tributo, un honor a todas esas lideresas de origen africano que lucharon por el bienestar de nuestras comunidades. Nosotros no podemos olvidar nuestro pasado, debemos vivir con él siempre porque nos llena de orgullo. Palemque es una comunidad que hoy por hoy conserva muchas manifestaciones de origen africano, que es lo que nos ha dado a resaltar a nivel mundial. Sin eso, cabe destacar de que a pesar de todo el aporte que hemos hecho a la comunidad, a la nación colombiana, padecemos de muchas dificultades y desde nuestro trabajo, desde nuestro quehacer diario, tratamos de aportar para que Palemque obtenga una mejor sociedad, una mejor calidad de vida. Esperamos sacar mayor provecho de todo este espacio, aprender, enriquecernos más de conocimiento de cada una de las propuestas, de conocer a nuestros hermanos. Para mí es un sueño estar acá compartiendo con ustedes, como también es un sueño conocer nuestro continente madre, compartir con nuestros hermanos africanos. Y hoy por hoy vemos el sueño que se hace cada vez más cerca, lo vemos más cerca, que cada vez es más posible hacerlo realidad. Estamos dispuestos a dar lo mejor para mejorar a nuestras comunidades, de unir a toda esa hermandad afro que se encuentra en el territorio colombiano, tanto en el Pacífico colombiano como en la costa caribe y en cada uno de los departamentos de Colombia. Que podamos trabajar de la mano, como fue el sueño de Tomás Sankara, Patrick Lumumba, todas esas personas africanas, esa ideología, todos esos sabios, todos esos guerreros que de una u otra manera lucharon por la Unión Africana, porque África es el continente madre y debemos llevar la bandera de nuestros países. Como decía una vez Patrick Lumumba, nosotros no necesitamos ayuda, que nos ayuden a seguir necesitando ayuda porque nos convierten aún en más esclavos. Y como decía Tomás Sankara, el pueblo será verdaderamente cuando produzca y consuma lo que produce. Por la dignidad de todos los pueblos negros e indígenas del mundo, trabajemos por salvar nuestra humanidad. La mejora está en nuestras manos. Muchas bendiciones y un placer compartir con ustedes este espacio.
So that is Akin Bongani, who is the Coordinator General of the Red Benkos Polonia Kawaya, which is one of the Sankofa coordinating projects in Abiola, working on a process to not only rematriate the African personality in Abiola, but also to restitute that relationship between the peoples of Africa in Abiola and the indigenous peoples of that land who have also been despoiled and stolen away from their own resources. And in that, he offered firstly his ancestral greetings, his warm thanks to you all for attending, and for his own gratitude for being able to be at this event, because he sees this as one step closer to his own personal dream of one day being able to see Africa and African soil itself. And he was also grateful that the work we're doing is trying to establish these links, because for all African peoples, our goal and our dream is to achieve the sovereignty of our peoples, of our land back home. And they have it very clear in the Palemque, in San Basilio de Palemque, that the preserve of this identity, of this cultural practices of Ubuntu, of how do we live and how do we sustain ourselves, is emblematic in the words of Thomas Sankara, who said that a people will only achieve their peoplehood when they produce what they consume and they consume what they produce.
Ashe.
So yeah, we give thanks to all of our family, many of whom we don't pay attention to. The largest diaspora, as my auntie Vera always explains, the largest diaspora outside of Africa is in Brazil, where some hundreds of millions of African people exist. This is the largest country, the largest African nation. It's actually in fact in Brazil. And daily, young people, women are being murdered by right-wing fascist governments, just like the one that we have in this country. And we don't pay enough attention to restitute and restore the memory of those people who are dying and fighting, not so that we can sit here and look pretty and feel good about ourselves, but so that we can concretize a serious strategy for our Pan-African reparations. And so when we talk about Pan-African reparations, we mean nothing less than the total reclamation of the sovereignty of Africa, her resources, her cultural and spiritual material and resources, her identity, and everything that means for the restitution of our peoplehoods. And this is the disrepair that we find ourselves in. And this, today, with the All-party Parliamentary Group on African Reparations and with you here, is an inaugural session of one of which we should have many, that allows us to come together in order to harmonise our perspectives and really build on what has happened before. I also share the Secretariat of the All-party Parliamentary Group on African Reparations, through working with the Global African Reparations Forum of London, or GARFO, and also as part of the International Network of Scholars and Activists for African Reparations, also known as INASAR, and working with others who are here in our African Learning Community in the United Kingdom, and also as the Registrar of Sankofa Kumba, which is a Pan-African community global educational complex seeking to harmonise our educational experiences, and particularly the knowledge produced by our resistance. Because we believe that the knowledge that matters to us now, and the education that matters to us now, is the types of information and knowledge that were shared by our ancestors and by our freedom-fighting forces in a concrete struggle to secure our African reparations. And that's important because all of us in this room, to varying degrees, but every single one of us in this room has been miseducated. And so the question of African reparations starts with a question of humility, that many of us are fighting and we don't know what we're fighting for. We don't know where we're fighting to. We don't know who we're trying to go towards. And as an esteemed elder of mine, Uncle Kofi Mawili Klu, said the other day, how many of us actually know beyond our grandparents in our family, truly? So the stories of resistance that actually live within each and every one of us, we're yet to restitute them to build the type of force that our ancestors can be proud of. And that's one of the big critiques we have to level at those of us who are Pan-African reparationists, who say we're for reparations, all peoples, and all people who say they're part of the Pan-African liberation movement, because we still find ourselves today in a situation of total disrepair. The gap between the poorest and the richest is widening, and our freedom-fighting forces are still being chased around and isolated by Western imperialism and encircled by the same forces that killed the likes of our freedom fighters 60 years ago. So, this is a historic opportunity for us to reassert our interest in securing our futures. And I have the honour to give a tribute to MKO Abiola and Bernie Grant MP. Two people who have walked the road of African reparations, two people who died in very suspicious circumstances. Both of them died from sudden heart attacks. And when the CIA was asked, no, not the CIA, when the UN representative was asked about the circumstances surrounding Mashoud Abiola's death, they refused to respond due to personal circumstances, and that's the quote. So who are these people? Mashoud Abiola was a Nigerian businessman, quite a dubious one to be fair, but a Nigerian businessman interested in politics, who came up through telecommunications companies in Nigeria, and with his own heritage and background became a very popular figure because of his interest and his concrete clarity about the need for Africa to wean itself off of the dependence of the entire world. And in Nigeria, we know that this case is particularly stark because that's a country that's been underdeveloped specifically for the purpose of producing the world's oil, particularly the world's oil, and is being plagued by the corruption that is being funded by no less than places like the Houses of Parliament in Britain. So when in 1994, Mashoud Abiola was moving to become president, he was forcibly imprisoned by his the then military commander, Abacha. And it was during that time that the legacies of what he was really working on started to really impact upon the world, and people had clarity about this. Because alongside the eminent people's group, Mashoud Abiola, who had connections with the UN, was funding and sponsoring the international movement, the international social movement for African reparations. And he did so because he had clarity, again, that the question of underdevelopment was a clear question of the anti-colonial struggle. And it was a question of national liberation. Not racial justice in some small corner of the world, not representation struggles in some tiny institution of the enemy, but to liberate ourselves totally from this dependency. And interestingly enough, it was Mashoud Abiola who was funding Bernie Grant MP's campaigns here in the UK in those years of the early 90s. And so when the Abuja Conference took place in 1993, and the Abuja Conference, which is also known as the first Pan-African Conference on Reparations, which had very, very clear objectives, and came up with a very, very clear statement, which I invite you to actually go up and look, which then inspired Bernie Grant, who was there, to go around and be campaigning in the UK under the auspices of the Afrikan Reparations Movement UK, that's ARM UK. Again, a staunch Pan-Africanist who had clarity about the fact that this was about a Pan-African struggle for total liberation. And that produced the Birmingham Declaration in 1994. Some of these words still ring with us today. And they ring with us today because our struggle has been decapacitated. Many of our forebears have been killed. If you walk the streets of Brixton in this country, there are many even freedom fighters who are in a sorry state on the streets of Brixton because the system has chewed them up and spat them out. And when you walk past these people who've been impoverished, who've been despoiled of our resources, all of them have a concrete contribution to make to this African reparations struggle. So this All-party Parliamentary Group on African Reparations is completely useless if we don't make this real effort for all of us to engage the campaigning efforts to find each and every one of us, all African peoples, who deserve to be heard, whose stories deserve to be shared, and who are leading the struggles in very concrete ways, in ways that we can't even yet imagine. And so I'm just going to quickly go through some of the clarity that I was discovering in Bernie Grant's messaging, right? Because we've come a long, long, long way from the declarations of the past. Since the 90s, we've been rolled back. And if you're a young person like me, we don't have a lot of patience for an older generation that doesn't have a responsibility to explain to the young people what happened and what went wrong.
Right. Yes.
Because what happened and what went wrong? Why is it that if you're growing up in the UK, and that's just the UK where you're meant to be comfortable, there is no guarantee that in 2050, the world as it exists now is even going to exist? When estimates are saying 3 billion people are going to be displaced by 2050 due to climate change. Why are we not talking about this? It seems like every other community is getting serious about the situation we're in, and we as African people have found many ways to distract ourselves from the concrete conditions of our people, of our brothers, our sisters, of our daughters, our sons, of our grandparents, of our veteran freedom fighters who still exist, whose stories are just gathering cobwebs. And this is the tension about this conference and our work. Because in Bernie Grant's statement that he gave in 1993, he emphasized what we now call the Mangamese, or the African Holocaust of chattel enslavement, colonialism and neo-colonialism. He named all three. He didn't stop at chattel enslavement. He didn't stop at colonialism. And he had clarity also about the role of the IMF, the UN, NATO, the Western imperial forces, who have a global strategy to continue to rape and pillage our peoples, our lands and our resources. So where is our global strategy as an African people? Why do we siphon ourselves off to do Black Lives Matter protests when there's 1.4 billion people who are black and who are living and matter on the continent of Africa? Why do we do that? And would MKO Abiola and Bernie Grant be turning in their graves if he saw that we weren't taking seriously the legacy of where we've been in the past? But this is the imperative of the moment. 26 million people died in the Middle Passage. They just died in the Middle Passage because the conditions just of the ships alone were not conducive to life. They say some 10 million people died in Belgium's Congo under King Leopold. If any of you have been to Elmina Castle, then you know the atrocities that our ancestors have been through. And if you go to Elmina Castle today, as some people will tell you, there's no real reverence for the people who died there. It's become a tourist attraction. And we in the diaspora participate in that tourism. So when they ask the question, who let these African people have an all-party parliamentary group on African reparations, to allow them to talk to themselves and make their radical sounds, we have to be very concrete that it's the millions of starving and struggling African people. It's people like MKO Abiola, it's people like Bernie Grant, it's the tireless campaigners, it's the sleepless mothers who have made it possible for us to use this space. So if we're going to enter this space, just use it with that type of reverence to respect the many people who cannot be here. Because we don't do this for ourselves, we do it for them. And it's not about some historic wound in the past, but it's about the fact that young people around the world who look like me are busy killing each other because they don't know who they are, and they don't know what they're owed, and they don't know what their responsibility they have to claim that role now in today's world.
Right.
However, I'll be quick. However, luckily, again it's historic because 30 years after these conferences took place, we find ourselves again in a moment where Pan-African freedom fighting forces, the same as we had before, are standing up, are holding themselves, are finding each other, are building connections around the world in an age where it's far more possible than it was before, and who we can say in a concrete time like today, on the 21st of October 2023, we have freedom fighting forces like Ibrahim Traoré in Burkina Faso, we have the CNSP of Niger, and we've got the Sahel Defense Alliance emerging, which has clarity that we're not going to move anywhere if we don't do something about these borders, we don't harmonise our efforts, we don't pool our militaries, and we don't take back our lands and resources. And that's happening right now. So we've got a lot to stand up for and be happy about, because there is a future for us, and we have those forces that we should be pointing to. And that's why we've had the honour to make sure that the people of Haiti, the people of Niger, the people of Mali and Burkina Faso, the flags of Eritrea who've resisted imperialism on a sole travel of being sovereign peoples,
led by indigenous communities like the Over Traditional Authority, who are fighting for plurinationalism and a new constitution in Africa, that we can stand up and say we have a fight on our hands and it is an anti-imperial struggle. So, to end really, the only thing really left to say is that we have to concretize the reality of what our situation is, not to be despairing, but to be honest, that it's our responsibility to tell the truth, because it does us no justice to pretend like we're all fine. And this is something, again, that Bernie Grant said. 6 million people are displaced in the Democratic Republic of Congo. 1 million of those happened this year. There are mass mobilizations for Palestine right now. But this genocidal event that's been taking place in the Congo, we as a people have been utterly silent about. So shame on us, to be honest. And 1,000 to 3,000 people die per day in East Africa due to drought and famine. And it's because the lights are on in this building that happens. So, we have to use this effort today, and we're going to hear about the statement of intentions for today's conference, to build clarity, to work, to harmonise our perspectives, to have the humility of listening carefully to each other, and to come out to reorganise ourselves with positive action steps to defend our communities, to defend our interests, and to guarantee a future for ourselves. And that will happen if we first start by knowing our story and reharmonising our efforts and building together. So when we have this mantra that's been popularised by the African Emancipation Day Reparations March Committee, which is education is preparation for reparations, that is what today is about. That is what we all need to be here for, and let's each one teach one.
Education is preparation for reparations.